When you look at a city such as New York from satellite imagery, you see a lot of horizontal and vertical lines crossing between buildings and intersections. This is known as the grid method. The grid method was the founding framework for American cities, and besides New York, almost every city in America has adopted this design choice. By using this method, American cities were perfectly designed for both residential and commercial uses, since its streets bordered buildings on each side. This can be visualized in a city like Los Angeles, where you can see the grid method being used for over 5 straight miles of streets. While this method of city planning was great for commercial and residential uses, European cities had a different approach to city planning. When you look at a city such as London from satellite imagery, you don't see many grids at all, and you might not see any in Europe. This is because they did not use the grid method to build cities. They instead built radial-based cities. A radial-based city is based on a series of concentric circles that surround a traffic intersection. This can be seen all across Europe in cities such as Paris and Denmark. The design dates back to the ancient times, but is still very useful in today's cities. Again, this is something you rarely see in the United States, and there are many reasons behind this. For one, US cities were designed for profitability, and the grid method allows as many homes and buildings to be placed in a certain location without wasting any space. It also means that the city will be designed for cars and not for walking or biking. While this method has worked for hundreds of years, it shows how European cities are better designed for residential use over commercial uses. But this statement is also not 100% true. While the cities are better designed for walking and bicycles, they still serve for commercial use. Take this image of the Champs-Élysées, where there are large streets down the center and barely an intersection, something in contrast to New York City. Just by looking at this image, you can tell that the city was designed for walking and not cars. Another key factor in play is land use laws in the US and European cities. For example, agricultural subsidies in Europe have persuaded farmers not to sell their land to developers and instead continue farming on it to prevent large development projects from taking shape. This can be seen in Paris, where there are still small farms that surround the city. But when you compare that to New York, there are no farms in sight. Land use laws have played a big role in how cities have been built and developed all across the globe, and they are partially responsible for why cities are all designed in their unique way. The intricate city planning of Europe extends beyond streets and walkways. Observing the map of Europe's mass transit railway system, which spans 33 countries, reveals a dense network with comprehensive coverage, leaving virtually no area without railway access. Now, if we compare this to a map of railroad tracks in the US, it's a different story. While parts of the US have some good mass transit, there are areas of the country that aren't covered by Amtrak, the nation's largest passenger railroad service. But let me show you another map. This time, let's see the map of high-speed railways in Europe. Now, obviously, high-speed railways won't be as common as regular speed railways, as they require excellent design, strict planning, and massive investment. But yet, we can see a good network of rail lines present all across Europe. Now, if you see the same on the US map, there is a major difference. While the US does have some higher speed rail, like the Acela line in the Northeastern Corridor, it is hardly an effective map of transport solutions. And the Acela line isn't that fast either. It can reach about 150 miles per hour, but the average is less than 70 miles per hour. This is not the case for Europe's insanely well-designed railroad system. High-speed trains in Europe can reach speeds of up to 200 miles per hour. You must remember that Europe's railroad system accomplishes everything while spanning 33 different nations in a very diverse continent. Now, many of you must be thinking that Europe can achieve this because it is a much smaller nation than the United States. This is simply not true. While the area of the European Union is smaller than that of the United States, continental Europe is about 1.04 times as much as the US. So we can dismiss this argument that the United States can't be that well designed because it's too big. Europe is simply better designed. As an American, we might not understand why railroad tracks or public transport as a whole are so important. Driving a car to work seems fine, right? Well, no. Europe showcases why a primary focus on private transportation is so detrimental to a well-functioning transit system. Look at these maps. They show the US road network versus the EU. As you can see, the EU's road network is not nearly as impressive as the US's. And yet, when you look at some of the most congested cities in the world, European countries don't feature particularly prominently in the global rankings. This is pretty shocking information, because you'd assume that the country with a more expansive road network has a lot less congestion, especially considering the United States has devoted lots of time and money to the highways. Around $70 billion have been spent on the resurfacing and expansion of highways, a process that researchers have consistently found only spurs greater use of cars, and, therefore, more congestion. So, how come Europe is less congested when they have fewer roads? Well, it all comes down to de-incentivizing the use of cars, and, most importantly, making anatomy alternatives. Europe does this by having both private and public transportation infrastructure, which technically the US has as well. It's just not as good when compared to Europe. But on top of this, Europe makes it pretty expensive to buy, own, and use a car. This is achieved by having high taxes on vehicles and gasoline. Here's a map of worldwide gasoline prices. As you can see, European nations are in the top rankings, while the US lies at the 70th position, charging very little. But let's be very clear. It's only a good idea to make it expensive to drive a car if you have an attractive alternative, which Europe does. Europe has adopted a great strategy to make the roads less congested for those who need them, and give everyone else an affordable and efficient alternative, being Europe's amazing public transport, like the trains on the railways or the trams on the roads. You will be shocked to know that some of the US cities got rid of their public transport to make room for more cars. American streetcars like trams were removed to make way for bigger roads, whereas European cities like Lisbon, Warsaw, Budapest, Milan, Rome, and Prague have retained and expanded their original 19th century tram network. Also, the beautiful architecture of Europe greatly contributes to the extraordinary public transport of Europe. Europe has hundreds of years of uninterrupted architectural development in different styles and resilient materials. And while some of the oldest buildings may have been demolished, there are plenty of villages built in the medieval period that still stand, providing not just a window to the past, but also something nice to look at, with soft colors and the use of natural products such as stone and wood. Life in Europe has a lot to offer, from beautiful sights to a prosperous economy. There are thousands of reasons why this part of the world is a great spot to visit and live in. The United Nations recognizes 46 member states. This means we can say that there are 46 different countries in Europe. Every single one of those countries is unique, having their own culture, habits, customs, language, and millions of other tiny elements that make them special. Although we can group European countries into subcategories based on their language and geographical region, you won't find two that would be the same. There might be certain similarities between different nations, but there are just as many differences. It is wonderful to live on a continent with such cultural variety. Each visit abroad, no matter how close or how far, supplies you with new knowledge and exposes you to previously unknown customs. The delightful surprises never stop coming, and one lifetime is not nearly enough to discover all the peculiarities of European traditions. Although Europe is home to so many countries, it is the second smallest continent in the world. This makes travel within Europe incredibly easy. First of all, organizations such as the European Union and the Schengen Zone allow citizens of the member states to travel within Europe without limitations. Not only does this mean no need for a visa, but not even a passport is necessary to cross borders if you're a European citizen. Secondly, the compact size of Europe allows one to travel by train from one side of the continent to the other. Initiatives such as Interrail make this not only possible, but also affordable. There are also plenty of coach companies operating across all of Europe, ready to take you to your chosen destination at a very low rate. For example, a single trip from Berlin to Vienna could cost you as little as €30, or $33 if you book in advance. If you value the comfort of shorter travel, there are plenty of cheap European airlines for you to choose from. If you catch a special deal, you could get from London to Copenhagen in under 2 hours for the whopping price of just $16. Due to the affordability and ease of travel, living in Europe makes it virtually impossible to resist the temptation. It would be a sin not to take advantage of cheap tickets and relatively short travel time to get to know every little nook of Europe. Europe as a whole enjoys a reputation as a very well-developed continent with a thriving economy. Of course, the comfort rate and cost of living depend on the country, but all 46 enjoy a prosperous economy. Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, as well as Scandinavia, are considered some of the most expensive, but also the most luxurious places to live in Europe. Spain, Portugal, Poland, and the Balkans come across as some of the most affordable European destinations. Despite the general differences, it is safe to say that all European countries offer a good standard of living and a well-developed economy. You can safely choose where to live in Europe based on the climate, culture, language, and any other factor you consider important without having to worry about prioritizing these aspects that will affect your standard of living. And that concludes our video on why Europe is so well designed. If you enjoyed watching the video, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Geomore. Until next time.